Yeah, so in regards to your the conversation earlier about apostles, that you wouldn't consider them being tied down to a small group. Am I wrong then to consider that maybe an apostle who's just developing that gift might actually find the small group as a good training ground to be able to really hone their skills before they go and do a major thing like that?
Yep. And what I'd strongly encourage is don't focus on the gift or the title, focus on the function. So what do movement pioneers, movement catalysts do? Because just because you fill out a questionnaire and now I've got this gift or this title, that's not really how it works. I mean, Paul says, you really want to claim this title? Do you know what we go through? Do you know what it's like to have, So he's looking at character, he's looking at function more than he's sort of looking at, I got something on the business card. And that's where those 5 levels just start. If somebody thinks they're just start connecting with people far from God. Start making disciples, start forming new disciples into new churches. Start helping others multiply that. Well, okay, we'll begin to say maybe there's a gift rising to the surface here.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions?
We have a question over here.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Steve.
So, Dave, you were talking that in this country there are no churches, I think, that are leading movements, right? Wasn't that one of the things you said as you went through?
I think Steve's telling me I'm wrong.
Right. So I'm really interested in just knowing, okay, so this is happening in other places in the world. And if it isn't happening in the United States, why isn't it? And what does it take? Why is the United States different than other places? And if it is happening, what is that looking like?
It's beginning to happen. And so in the book, you'll see some case studies, and we talk about Jeff, but also other leaders. There's another case study that Troy's involved in. I just hadn't met Troy early enough to get it into the book, but down in Southwest Florida. You don't want to sort of name it and claim it too early, because you want to see, okay, we're beginning to see good signs, all right? We're beginning to see those multiple generations. We're beginning to see leaders come up from the harvest. So I think there's a good chance you will see it happen in the US. Why is it less likely to happen in the Western world? We're fairly secularized, and so is the church. We've lost our confidence in the gospel. And also there's a sociological, relationships have broken down in our culture, so it's a lot harder to see multiplication take place. That's still a bedrock principle and key. So it's a lot tougher in Europe. I'm based in Britain now. But the principles still apply. And every now and again, God throws in a game changer. So the principle, because these are not just these are solid biblical principles. I'll give you another reason, to be honest. I'm not starting with the movement thing. I'm starting with the principles. And when I wrote the first book, we got the principles right. Okay, we could add apostolic leadership. That's what I discovered as we went out and trained and mobilized. People got the vision. Nothing's happening. Virtually nothing. And I realized the missing link, and this is why I wrote the second book, what Jesus started, is nobody knows what to do on Monday morning. And I would add into that what I call the missional fog. That somehow that word, I think, it's like the word love. It's become so much, and it almost has lost its meaning. And it's become so broad and so vague. What Michelle and I learned is sooner or later, you have to do what Jesus did and go out and connect with people far from God and share with them and call them to follow Jesus, and then help them to become a disciple who helps other people follow Jesus. And most of our people, and we're responsible for this, don't know what to do on Monday morning. They just know they've been exhorted, they've been told, they've been envisaged, and they just don't know what to do. And we can train them. And as soon as we start training and modeling and equipping people, people start coming to faith, even in the West, immediately.
Let me throw a couple more questions at you. And by the way, too, if you want to go ahead and throw it out there on Twitter with using the hashtag NTG15, Steve, I think you agreed that you said you'd love to follow up on these questions via Twitter, too. So if you're thinking about this later on, go like, oh, dang, I should have asked him. You can hit him up that way. Okay, so you end the book. In the last chapter, chapter 10, you really finish with, it's a powerful and provoking question. What would it take to stop you?
Yeah.
What would it take to stop you? What were you getting at, and why did you choose to end the book like that?
I think it was a balance from our emphasis on movements and multiplication, seeing that a pattern in the lives of movement pioneers in Scripture and throughout history and today is at some point they're going to find something that just stops them in their tracks, that I can't go any further. They're going to find, and sometimes it's a personal tragedy, sometimes it's just, I cannot see the breakthroughs. I cannot make this thing happen. And to see, that if it's going to be a movement of God, it's going to have the shadow of the cross over it, both the cross and the resurrection. And for Paul, this is weakness, this is power in weakness. That somehow we have to be what we're trying to multiply. And especially, every Christian's got to face this, but especially movement pioneers. There will be key times where you face a personal tragedy, or you're a deep conflict in the ministry, or a health, or whatever it is that could easily unmake you as a leader and even as a person. And we think the enemy is that thing we're facing, when the reality is this, God is opening you up to a deep work, a very costly work. Because this is the journey of his son. And this is the example of Paul and virtually every other movement pioneer I've looked at. And so you've got to be prepared for the battle. And you've got to be prepared for this weakness in power thing. Because if God is going to entrust us with seeing whole cities and nations and people groups won, we've got to know his power. And we have to also know that it's power and weakness. This message of the cross becomes part of us. And it's both a task and a challenge, and it's a gift because it sets you free.
Yeah. And I get the sense as you're talking there that, specifically, that's kind of a word for some of us in this room. Right there.
It will be.
Let me ask you this. I would love for you to do this. Take 2 minutes or so and kind of wrap up. You have become a friend of NewThing and of mine, and you know a little bit about NewThing and kind of some of the things that we're about, what we'd love to see God do through us. Just speak as candidly as you would, and challenge and kind of challenge us, going like, here's some things you guys and girls are doing great at, but here's some things you need to really be aware of. Just kind of challenge us.
I think you've got the vision thing, and you keep revisiting the 30,000 foot view. Mm-hmm. I would say you've got to learn the micro thing.
The micro thing?
The micro thing.
What people do on Monday morning?
What people do on Monday morning. So this morning, I get up this morning and Troy says, Steve, let's do the micro thing. And we're walking and we're just doing what we call the 3/3. It's a discovery Bible study process, and we're in 1 Thessalonians 2. And what is it saying to us? How's Jesus revealed in this? What do we need to do? We're just applying it to our lives, and we're both concluding, and everybody in a movement is doing this. They know what the 3/3 are. They can do discovery Bible study, obedience-orientated discipleship. It's bread and butter. And then Troy and I are saying, like Paul, we need to be upfront with the gospel. We walk into the Apple store because the real reason I came was to buy the iPhone 6S. And we're working out, and we'll call the attendant Susie. And while we're sorting it out, Troy's connected, and he said, well, has anyone ever explained the gospel to you? And as we're doing credit cards and all of that, he's just doing a little thing we call the 3 circles, a great way to share the gospel. And she's just riveted. And we're praying for her, and she's a single mom, praying for her son who's got a health issue, and talking about how she could grow in a relationship with Jesus as she begins reading the gospel stories with her son, 5 years old. We stepped out of it because it was all done, and we left, and then I came back because I wanted to download some stuff in the store. She stops what she's doing to come over and just keep talking to us, okay? Now, can anyone, not just in this room, but the people you influence, how many have you trained to share their story, to do a discovery Bible study with somebody who's far from God? We call it the early offer of prayer. Mm-hmm. We offered in the Apple store to pray for Susie and her son. And then, do they know how to transition out of that and just say, hey, at the moment in your life, are you near or far from God? It's a wonderful question. Would you like to be nearer? Yeah, I would. She said, we talked about brokenness. She said, I'm broken, I said, well, can I tell you how I was far and came near? Have you trained your people in that? I mean, in this room, you could have thousands of people that you would train, and even if only a quarter of them begin to go, and I assure you, people will come to Christ next week because you've trained them. And they know how to make a disciple doing Discovery Bible Study. There's some of the micro things, but how you make the first disciple will determine whether it's a movement or not.
So what I'm hearing you say, you look at NewThing, you're going, hey, great job on the 30,000 foot, great job on the vision, good job on mobilizing people with the apostolic function and gifts, but what about the thousand people who wake up on Monday morning? How are you mobilizing? How are you training? What are they doing? And that's the thing we need to go to work on.
This is what changes you. Because I wrote the first book without doing this stuff until my wife beat me up big time. I got a word from the Lord through my wife. It's an awful experience, guys. Steve, it's a great book. When are you going to do something? And I couldn't be offended because it was God. So you step out in fear and trepidation and weakness, okay? You have the skills because you've trained and practiced your people. They step out or you step out. This is what changes you forever. It's actually not Chicago or North America or Kenya. It's I stepped out and Jesus turned up and touched a life. That's what actually your people will not be motivated by 10,000. Yeah. They'll be motivated because they actually love people. Yeah. We see that. Yeah. They will be motivated about Susie at the Apple store and her son. Right. That's what we signed up for, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So you've got to train. You've got to take a risk. You've got to, Troy's hold me accountable, and we're going to do this stuff. But what changes us all is Jesus rose from the dead and still leads the way. He's there he's already there.
In the Apple store.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, let's say thanks to Steve. Great stuff.
Thank you.